Well, hey gamers, I was just about to blow myself up in the name of Allah when I decided to come back to talk to you about Scorn. So, on that video that I uploaded, the silent walkthrough that I did, somebody commented that 2.5 hours, this truly is Serbia's greatest crime. If you don't know, that's a reference to the Yugoslav wars, but he doesn't know how right he is, because after I uploaded my review yesterday, I decided to look into Scorn's artbook, and the lore and actual depth to this universe is so much greater than this game lets on. When I said this game felt like there was so much cut out that it was only barely scratching the surface, and not even I had any idea how right I was. In the game, we only got about half of the areas that they had actually planned, and even then the areas that they had wanted to put in, well, the areas that they had actually put in, were so much smaller than what they were originally going to do. The actual extent to this universe is incredible, and it's all here in the art book, and this shit is like the Scorn Bible. It talks about like life and evolution, it talks about religion, it talks about even wars and such. So yeah, much about the same things the Bible talks about. Anyway, the art book is so good, and I want to take you on a journey through it where we look at the things that we never got in the game, and also like looking into expanding on what the game actually showed us that many of you may be confused about. We'll skip over the art book's introduction. Of course, I'm not going to go through every little detail. You can grab it yourself if you really want. I just have a digital copy that I got from buying the deluxe version of the game. I want to start getting into the meat of it, and we'll do that by first off briefing over the protagonist. Now, you can see the first image of the protagonist they give us is very clearly what we got in game, with this parasite creature melding over him. It looks nothing like the later concept designs we'd see of him, but I still really like this look of him. I think it looks pretty cool. And also there are these designs of, a female version, really. We could see her as a girl. Maybe they planned on adding, I don't know, you choose your gender at the start, I don't know. Though it might just be a look at what, female variants look like. These are what just the people who live in the Scorn world look like, effectively. But everyone has been saying how they've not seen any, girls, at all, in this, other than in the tapestry. Well, as it so turns out, there are women, which is, should not be shocking, but I guess it somewhat is. Also, as it says down here, these are only a fraction of the early concept designs, shares concept designer Philip Akovic. Some of the designs were really far out. They strayed too much from our concepts, being too weird and not relatable enough. Yeah, God forbid anything in Scorn is too weird. But getting right into the meat of it, let's take a look at the different locations. We'll start with all the locations that we actually visited in the game, and then get to other locations that we didn't visit. And obviously we'll start with the first area that we go to in the game, apparently called the Assembly. Scorn's opening location is a factory that makes players ask some very deep questions, very disturbing questions of themselves. Ostensibly it's a recycling plant, a noble cause you might think until you discover what is being recycled. Indeed, we find out it is the flesh of the various little critters that they have working down here. The assembly plant seems to be the most true to what we saw. It does look like there are some areas where they wanted to make it look a bit bigger than what we actually got, but generally speaking, it was, effectively pretty much exactly what we got. Those drones, by the way, I was right, I said they were fertilizer drones, and they are. Though the book doesn't really explain what the red, that liquid we saw is, like the cum chalice is. It does state that that big building that looked like to be some sort of processing facility is in fact, just like a walkway, pretty much, to go down. Which, we kind of find out in the game anyway, that it's like a junction to walk through. And generally speaking, in-game, that area felt like probably the best area, really. although it was fun to walk through, which, you know, I liked. I'm sure everyone else really liked it. But the next comes up is just the wall. Built not with bricks and mortar, but from flesh and organs and uterine lining. Uterine lining, gee, that's gross. Here stands the answer to the question of where Scorn's protagonist originates. The universe's humanoid creatures are neither born from a creature or assembled in a lab, but birthed from ruptures in the side of an unnatural embankment the team refers to as the Genesis Wall. The main character's genesis expressed visually, says game director. I'm just saying Pekla. There is nothing more to do than that. How did it come into being? Why is it this way? We are not explaining, he teases. Which, yeah, kind of goes in something that I was thinking of, like, why do they need sexual reproduction? Why do they need sexual organs? If they're, like, birthed in walls, it is a how did they get there? But the little pods that they're grown in look absolutely, they look really cool, they look amazing. And we have seen it before in one of the trailers. But this is an area that happened, you know, really quickly. And it was just kind of linked into the fields, which is, you know, the next bit. The field. Think of a field and chances are your mind will jump to sunlight, grassy meadows, somewhere restful and serene. It is possible you may think of arable lands, freshly tilled soil, ready for crops to be planted, a source of life, of nourishment, or perhaps a sports field will pop into your head first, a place of entertainment and vibrant action. Any of these ring true? If so, Scorn does not care for your thoughts. And indeed it does not, because I was thinking that we were going to see more of this field, but we didn't. It happens very quickly, this is part of the game, and the concept art for this is really lovely. Might also throw in that it says Scorn isn't set on an alien world, but in the field you'd be forgiven for questioning whether there were extraterrestrial visitors about, evoking crashed ship imagery from movies such as Alien and Prometheus, almost as if their designs are based off the same artist. Taps into fear of the unknown, and shoes players are constantly questioning what lies ahead, but I will say, it does say Scorn isn't set on an alien world, which kind of hints that it's actually set sometime on a future Earth. Although, mind you, it might be doing a Star Wars where it's like, yeah, distant galaxy and humans are just natural to it because, shut up, I guess. But as far as this implies, well, these are humans and this is Earth. But the Fields of Decay do seem also relatively true to what we got in the game. It's just more that it's very short, I think. They should have made it, they definitely should have made it longer and had like puzzles and stuff in it, because it's the whole of the just fields is just you get up and you just walk to the assembly. The next, of course, on the list of places we've seen is the crater. From the perspective of the desolate, unprotected surface of the field, the location named the crater looks heavenly. A giant cylinder bored vertically into the ground like a storm drain, promising warmth, refuge from exposure, and a moment of respite from whatever prowls through the fog above. Who could possibly predicted that it would soon reveal itself to be a perilous descent into untold horrors? Well, horrors untold. Though I would like to quickly jump back to the fields, because it does talk about the fields a bit. It does suggest that there are supposed to be enemies in the fields, creatures lurking around there, or like some sort of weather environments that could have hurt the player, which, you know, to be honest, would have also been nice, would have given more of a interesting, you know, interesting gameplay to the fields, but I guess that must have just been something that got cut out. But the crater is, I want to say it's true to the game, though with the crater it feels like there's more that they wanted to do with it. Like, it's the bit in the game that leading up to it, they kind of showed off stuff from the crater the most, and really the crater was like, I think most people thought that was the entirety of what Scorn was. That was the central point of it. It's probably the most well fleshed out area in Scorn. I didn't mean to say what I had just said, but, you know, yeah, fleshed out. But yeah, it's probably the most well fleshed out area in all of Scorn. It is the most interesting one. And to be honest, I think they could have probably set the whole game in the crater, just expanded it a bit. It probably would have been, you know, also still pretty good. And interestingly enough, with the crater, whereas in other areas of Scorn, the flesh and technology is mixed, in the crater you can see there is a distinct separation between it, as if you see this invasive red flesh spewing everywhere. Which, you know, obviously comes from the little Chucky creatures, but we'll be getting onto them later. Because the next thing I want to talk to is something you may not have heard before, and that is Polis. The great realm called Polis is a place of aspirations and of reverence, of gleaming citadels and ornate murals, an abundance of vertical lines and triangular shapes borrowed from Gothic architecture gives Polis and its structure a sacral feeling, far removed from the wet grabs and gristle exploring during Scorn's earlier hours. Dare to study the details, however, and the key sensation that will bubble to the surface is one of sacrilege, which is pretty fitting. So if you don't know, this is the last area you see in the game. You may recognize this piece of art, for example. You may recognize this. This is the last area that we see in the game, and it's one that we don't get to explore very much. It's the one that is obsessed with sex and sexual desires, and this is like the city where all the main Scorn people live. And it's one of the most, you know, interesting places in it. So this place was going to be a massive like citadel that you could explore, and we saw glimpses of it, but we never truly got to see what really it was going to be like. Polis, and I'm not sure what we call its denizens, more like Polisians maybe, Police, but Polis was more of, seems like a cultural center of Scorn, of like religion and culture, while the outer areas, if we see the crater, the assembly, are these industrial areas. Polis isn't that. Polis is, you know, its capital, its cultural heart of this world that they're living in. It also goes over that vortex that we see at the end. It doesn't really explain what it is, but it does refer to it as being like psychedelic somewhat. And what that whirling vortex is, well, I have no idea. But the actual, you know, ideas of what Polis would be, this giant citadel, probably, considering it's like their, I don't know, government, their capital, this is where the people high up live, it would have been really interesting. And somewhat sad. It's sad that we didn't get to see, you know, more of it. And you can see a lot of art which actually comes from the trailer, you know, that never made it into the game, which you could see in like the earlier trailers, in fact. So there were aspects of Polis that were around. The Series X exclusive trailer, in fact, actually seems to be primarily showing off the city of Polis and its architecture, where you see these very sexualized designs. This obsession with sex and birth and pleasure may actually be due to the loss of it, because there is a thing that, you know, humans, you know, desire what they lack, right? And these creatures that are, if not humans, certainly stand-ins for them, may have lost this sort of reproductive ability, now being grown on walls, but yet still have a desire to reattain this sort of method of reproduction. Polis is probably one of the most, like, you know, it probably speaks the most to the human condition, or at least what it was going to be. But that's all of the areas that we actually saw in game. What about the areas we didn't see in game? Well, one of my favourites is the Blasted Labyrinth. All stories of a video game development come with tales of feature casualties, of levels and ideas that ended up discarded either during the concept phase or deep into development and testing. As much as Scorn defies comparison in many ways, it is no different from other games where it comes to this universal truth. The Blasted Labyrinth is one example of a feature both concepted and fleshed out before development was focused elsewhere. Originally conceived to be a transitional area between the crater and the tower, a second unused area you'll discover in just a few pages. It's a location brimming with its own lore. So, in one of my videos, someone commented that they thought that there was like, you know, some sort of war that went on. Well, as it turns out, whoever said that is completely correct. The labyrinth is a battle zone where we see these little critters that we'll find out later are actually called homunculi that fought some sort of war against the denizens of Scorn to try and take over Polis. Earlier on in Scorn's development, the short homunculi creatures had a bigger role within the world. The diminutive engineers yearned for power beyond their station and dreamed of taking over Polis, but ambition breeds greed and conflict, and the army was split into two opposing factions who waged war against one another. In that quest for dominance, one faction toiled away repurposing dead bodies to make armoured cyborgs, and the other focused its energy into building materialised robotic exosuits, and inevitably they clashed, with unaccountable losses suffered on both sides. So these homunculi were, I suppose, soldiers that that ended up going to war with each other. From what it seems, it looks like they wanted to take over Polis, but somewhat failed before they could actually get to do it, and they just started killing each other. Or maybe they did take over Polis and then they started killing each other. But what you can effectively see from Polis is that it's like all their homes. It's got this lovely architecture to it. And I absolutely love it. This is an absolute war crime that this was not in the game, personally. I do quite like the whole architecture, the way everything is designed. Like, we saw one of these homunculi with their cyborg warriors in the game in the city of Polis, but never really did we see, like, where they actually lived, what they did with themselves. They were really interesting, and this is definitely part of what we see them, you know, only being scratched along the surface, where we don't see truly what these people actually are. The final location to talk about is the tower. The second planned location to fall out of favour during Scorn's development was the tower, after players had negotiated the meandering, catastrophic pathways of the Blasted Labyrinth. They were to come face to face with a skyscraper in significantly better shape than most of the other structures so far witnessed at this point on the journey. A dominating pillar of pipes and ladders, with a base encircled by a curving slug of a structure. The tower's a sickly orange-brown that blends into the reddened clouds behind it. A sloping dirt pathway rising towards a sheath entrance makes for an imposing walk, but the tower's most striking external features by far are its two thick elevated tubes. Now, the tower is filled with these weird fleshy creatures, not like the Chuckus that we'd seen before in the creator, but these strange creatures that look like they were people, but their flesh has become deformed and somewhat like it started to kill them like a parasite, like a cancer, effectively. The giant creatures at the top of the tower is cursed with an ever-growing bulk from which legions of monsters are formed, which is this monster right here. And it's said later on that he's just a pathetic creature that can't move or do anything because of how much his flesh has actually just grown over him. This clearly was something that was cut from the game. You know, these monsters, which were very similar to the Chuckies, but another opposing force of just this abnormally grown flesh. The Chuckies have something similar, which we did see in the game called the Crater Queen, which we will be getting to later. And in fact, the Artbook directly refers to them as a sort of cancer. It seems that, like, the tower is some place of, like, contagion. It doesn't really explain what it is, but it feels like the tower is some place of, like, contagion. You know, like, where you'd send... I'm thinking, like, where you'd send... You know, where a village would, like, send out a leper in Yodi times. Where, you know, if someone had leprosy, they'd be cast out from the village because, you know, well, they've got leprosy. It's something like that. That there is this infectious, cancerous growth, because they're the recognisable bodies of Scorn people that have been melted into this. The labyrinth and the tower have such interesting ideas and stories behind them that well, we never got, like, there is, like, with the labyrinth, I guess you get the, you know, hints of, like, these, the little homunculi critters around, right? But, and with Polis, we do get an area that's really small, and I don't think truly, you know, honouring what Polis was supposed to be, but the tower, we never got a hint of any of that. There was actually, in the early trailers, we did see a bit of the tower where it's walking through this opening section. That is a bit of the tower, but we never, you know, we never got that, which is a shame, really. The amount of effort that they put into all these areas is very intriguing, but to skip over that, I want to now get onto the Inhabitants and look at this man's beautiful face. The first Inhabitants it goes over is the Moldmen. These, you know, the story of these strange mutated beings is one of trauma. The hens in the assembly battery farm, oh, they're making batteries in that assembly, are they? They're humanoids, bred as bodies to be utilised. They're not even given the dignity of a name, though the team refers to them as a Moldman on the account of their processed forms. And they have weird, freakish forms. They look kind of cute, don't they? I really like the look of them. Actually, you know what? I don't think they're cute anymore. That's fucking horrific. Maybe they should have been just put down. But the Moldman have, yeah, they've got a variety of different styles, and the actual idea of them as their own, they also have male and female, interestingly enough. I will say, however, that in the prologue of Scorn, if you notice, right, if between whether you kill Moldman or whether you release him, right? If you kill him and stick his arm in the little console, right, to get through, the door doesn't close behind you. But if you actually take him and leave him there, the door does close behind you. This suggests that Moldman actually escapes and goes off on his own adventure, because that means he pulled his arm out of the console. Which, obviously, you know, means that Moldman might actually get a happy ending. Which, to be honest, if anyone in Scorn deserves one, then it's him. And if you're listening, Ebb Software, then please give Moldman a happy ending. Make him like, you know, it could be like melancholy happy, but as long as the little guy dies happy, I'm fine. And if not, then I'm going to shove a glass jar up my ass. And you're Serbian, so I hope you remember what happened last time someone did that. The next creatures to go off, of course, are the crater creatures, which I've been calling Chuckus. Now, the crater creatures are actually far more interesting than we realise. First off, the little critter at the bottom, known as the Crater Queen, who I said was a beautiful lady, which turns out I was actually correct about that. It is a girl. It's like their little queen, and they've all been spewing from her flesh. Now, I remember in my theories video, I said that I didn't think she was linked to all the red flesh stuff. Well, as it turns out, she is. She's actually the progenitor for it. There was somebody who I thought said that, but then denied that they had said that. Well, it turns out you're right about being wrong. Are you wrong about being right? I'm not sure how I do that. But anyway, yeah, so this beautiful lady, this absolute beautiful babe, spewed out all these creatures. And you may know there were like 3 types of them. There were the small little, you know, the little chicken Chuckus, there were the big chunky Chuckus, and then there were the floppy Chuckus. But there were so many more that were, you know, planned. There was like the manta ray Chucku, the snake Chucku, the horrific abomination Chucku, whatever these things are. Although we did actually get the flying head one, mind you. Although, mind you, I think we got the worm Chucku as well, because, you know, that thing was like something that stuck to the ceiling. Although it only spat acid at you, it didn't blind you like it used to. I really love the look of this like manta ray Chucku. It looks beautiful, really. The skin on them is all weird, but the manta ray one actually looks really nice. Oh yeah, also, a little baby Chucku. I guess it's apt to call them crater creatures, because that seems to be where they were entirely centered throughout the, you know, throughout Scorn. They're entirely centered in the crater. Which brings on the question of, you know, what the Crater Queen actually was. I do feel like they were, like, the flesh that spewed off her was being used for, you know, some sort of mechanical thing that the Scorn denizens made, of course. And so far, these are the only creatures that have actually been described as being like just natural, like naturally evolved. Everything else seems to have come through some sort of weird like methodology. Even the Scorn people themselves have like altered themselves in some sort of way. These seem to be like the only like things you could directly call animals, let's say, that have, you know, naturally evolved to be like this. Now, one big question that I have is actually, so how does the Creator Queen, like, get all the mass for this? Like, she, you know, she has to be eating something, she has to be feeding off of something, doesn't she? So, like, as to how this happens. Unless, because you see the facility is decaying, unless, like, as the flesh grows out, it's kind of consuming everything around, like it's slowly decaying it and eating it. Somewhat like how coral feeds. Or how, like, you know, when you see plants fighting each other or coral fighting each other, they'll have all these, like, little tendrils that come out and they'll start just digesting everything around them. Because it all connects into the Creator Queen, it's, you know, obviously all going back to Nourisher. But the concept art and design of these creatures are so cool and so well done. And this was, you know, the creator so far in the game was probably the, you know, the largest part of the game that we actually get to see. Though I wish they had it more that you, like, as you went around the different areas, you could see some of the creator creatures were like, or the Chuckies, sorry, yeah, some of the Chuckies were like, because you saw the flesh coming out into the fields of decay, but I wish you saw like these creatures actually somewhat crawling out of the crater. You could maybe have it so that, you know, the fields are more desolate, so they find it harder to survive up there, but that they are, like, you know, slowly creeping up effectively. The next little monsters that the Artbook has us look at are the homunculi. Continuing Scorn's theory of treating every life form as a potential resource, these creatures are artificially created homunculi born out of experimentation to seek a different kind of living substance for consumption. They are made of a hallucinogenic matter that people use to reach higher states of consciousness, says the game director Pekla. Like plucked, bleached raw chickens with misshapen heads, lipless and red-eyed ones, at that jammed into their tops the knee-high aberrations cut ghastly figures. Living batteries is how concept artist Philip Akovic describes them, but instead of coming in AA, and D variants, they can be separated out by their shape. Homunculi mature within these synthetic jars, swelling in size until every atom of space is filled. Once freed from their prisons, the resulting body deformations effect become clear. Despite all sharing the same skinny legs and thick-set torso profiles, they have rounded, squared, or conical craniums depending on the shape of their jars. Regardless of shape, they possess great intellect. Early concepts that didn't make the final game show them to be great engineers, capable of assembling cyborgs from scratch or fabricating mechanized walking gear to help mitigate their own physical limitations. Now, this is interesting. So the lore of these guys is that they are, like, engineered in, you know, they're put into, like, these batteries, like, where is embryos, and as they grow, this outputs energy. You'd think it'd take energy rather than output it, but as they grow this, like, outputs energy to, like, make batteries, basically, kind of, you know, like Matrix style, really. And then, you know, once they outgrow it, they're released from their little chambers, or, as we saw, squished into juice. Now, the other question comes off as why aren't they all just squished into juice, or why are some of them released? But generally speaking, they are, you know, little engineers that take bodies of, like, I assume the deceased and start making all these cyborgs. It is really interesting, and there's also questions of why in that level is one of the cyborgs, you know, right there with the homunculus batteries, and why did we have to plug it into the cyborg to, you know, make it work? That seems a bit counterintuitive. So far, I think the homunculi are one of the most interesting, most fascinating aspects about Scorn. It's probably because of how little we actually got to see them. They're only at this one room, but they still played a rather big role, somewhat of a big role in the game where we have to fight one. Though it moves on to cyborgs, the little creative critters that I'm not going to talk about too much because it's very, you know, yeah, you know, they're very basic what they are. They're like the bodies of Scorn people that they've captured, put in all this mechanical bits so that they can pilot them. They do look very cool though, they're well designed. You see like these soldiers that they have that they've cobbled together. And how the homunculi have their own little, you know, society underneath where they, like, you know, to get around their physical deformations, they use these suits and pilot these, whatever the corpses of whatever they can find are. And the last thing that it goes over, the last denizen that it goes over, in fact, are the shells. Now, this goes into my theory that the minds are like they swap their minds between bodies, which is actually true, and there's a special little breed that they have for it called the shells, taking into account the idea of mind transfer between our physical bodies and artificially created shells. We added some elements of psychedelia to these creature designs, says concept artist Philip Akovic. I experimented with radically different forms, thinking about all the strange and interesting ways I can alter the way the player moves and experiences the world using a new body which doesn't even have to be humanoid at all. Yeah, now this seems like a part of the game that got cut out, the idea of being transferred between bodies. We only got to be transferred to one type, which was like the pregnant looking one. But if you look, they actually had tons of different types, and some of them you'll recognize from the murals, in fact. This seems to go into the sort of religious ideas of Polis, these sort of greater minds. You'll notice that some of them are rather purple. They have a purplish blue colour, and that's intentional, that once you reach a higher state of consciousness, that this white material becomes this, you know, blue sort of pinky stuff. That seems to somewhat be kind of what was happening at the end. It was like, because you got that web, and I don't think the web, that big intellectual like concept of web really comes up in the art book, but this is probably the closest we can get to it. It's really cool. Like, I think personally that this is probably an in-depth look into like the Scorn religion. You know, they're grown from these bodies, but they seek to make themselves like better, and it might go into the story what actually happened. Their whole society may have just transcended like the concept of like mortality or whatnot, that at the end when we see them going towards the vortex, that Scorn guy going to join his people, that's why he's trying to get there so badly. And of course, you know, it's all goes wrong at the end, and we never really get to see what is through that vortex. Which, to be honest, to have a longer version of the game that, you know, is like a long version of the game that explains it a lot more and gets you more the word. I don't think they should ever explain what is through there, because I think that's a part of the game that should intentionally remain mysterious and be up to the discretion of the viewer. But the shells are just the proof that my idea that it's like one mind between many bodies, because I worded it as a hive mind, but I don't mean like you control all the bodies at the same time. You switch between bodies, but you only were able to control one at a time, is what I was effectively saying, which turns out to be completely correct. Not necessarily the way I was thinking it, because I was thinking that, you know, once it's like once you died you were given another body, but you know, it is effectively there. It's basically what I was saying. Now, of course, let's go over, you know, the weapons. Now, most of the weapons are all the same, and I remember people like saying that the pistol is very similar to David Cronenberg's sci-fi, like the Glock 30 from David Cronenberg's sci-fi horror Existence, which, you know what, it is, really. They outright state it here. Though the sort of weapons, like there are a few weapons that we never got, like this like spray gun, this acid spray gun, and then this awesome one that like attaches into your arm. They had these other concept designs where you have like a mechanical arm where the gun is a part of it. To be honest, I much prefer the way they like actually did it rather than the whole mechanical arm thing. But it would have been interesting to get some of these other weapons to, you know, see how they would have played, and like maybe certain enemies are resistant to certain weapons and certain enemies are weak to certain weapons. Like the homunculi could have been resistant to that whole acid spray gun, but the chuckies could have been weak to it, for example. Here are some of the interfaces, like some of the old interfaces that they had. You can see like the concept designs for the old door key that they used to have, which was present in the demo. And after that, it's just variations to the logo. Although, my dear viewers, that was a brief look through the art book of Scorn. If you want to get it yourself, I would recommend it. I got the deluxe version, so I have a digital copy of it, which it was really fun to look through and really interesting to see the world that they had actually crafted, what they were originally going to do for this game. Now, I would really like them to like make a director's cut or make a part 2, something that gives us a better insight into what they want to do, preferably, you know, a director's cut, you know, something that could get their original vision back on track, so that we can see what they originally planned, maybe even seeing more actually than what they had originally planned. Because what this game is, right, it does not do justice to Peckla's original vision at all. Peckla's original vision is something like incredible. It's beyond like what we effectively would have originally imagined for this, and it's definitely beyond what most of the troglodytes on like the YouTube Let's Play scene are going to be doing for this game. Basically, the game itself does not do the whole concept of Scorn justice, and it needs something more to expand on the universe, really. Something like, you know, like Cyberpunk got an anime, you know, this Ebb Software, they go to like Studio Trigger, let's get a Scorn anime, where they're gonna like force Ebb Software to put in a lolly character. It can be this thing, it can be this mold lady critter, mold lolly, that's what it's called, mold lolly. But, yeah, anyway, so the next Scorn content that I'm going to be looking at is obviously editing down my commentary Let's Play and uploading that for you, so you get to see what I'm, you know, thinking as I first play through the game. And, of course, I want to do a video because looking back at these sort of comments that I got about theories on it and looking back to see who was right, and then I want to make a final video to see if we can pinpoint the actual lore of this game, to pinpoint not necessarily the lore but the story of what it is, building up from the theory, seeing what was confirmed, what was right, and then I will, you know, try my best hand at an explanation of the lore, because so much of this game is still very mysterious, and I think there's a lot to talk about, and I think there's, you know, a lot more that you can talk about, especially if Ebb Software wants to continue with Scorn. And, of course, I am begging them on Twitter to make, you know, a director's cut version, which the rest of you should be doing. If you want to see more of this, you know, let them know this is what you want. Because for a first game, at least, like, what they came out, like, the game falls short of their vision. But the game, even of itself, for a first-time game for this studio, is still really good. And I do hope they carry on with it and or even make other games. So you probably should, you know, ask them directly on like Twitter or wherever you can to be like, hey, make more, like lengthen this director's cut. But this is what I'm gonna bang on about that other people seem to be picking up now. Director's cut of Scorn is what we want. However, dear viewers, I will say that for this video, I'm gonna have to dip. Now, the rest of you can either, you know, if you haven't seen any of my other videos on Scorn, and if you would like to, then please do. Also, I've hit 400 subscribers, which is pretty decent, because at the start of the month I was like on 140 or something. So, if you want to stay tuned for any more Scorn content that I'm going to be doing, because there's some more that I want to do, or if, you know, you want to watch my old stuff, you wish to see my playthrough of it, that the commentary one will be uploaded soon. The silent playthrough is already being uploaded. I will catch you next time, dear viewers.